What's going on? So I got asked about the 1985 World Series between the Kansas City Royals and St. Louis Cardinals. It was the Missouri battle. People take that serious there. If you're in the Midwest, just because Kansas City and St. Louis is close, people take that serious. To this day, I got family in St. Louis. You don't see a lot of them rooting for Kansas City with Patrick Mahomes or rooting for Chicago. That Midwest rivalry is real. This World Series, Game 6 in particular, well, the late umpire Doc Manger, who called George Order out safe when Jack Clark tossed the ball to Ty Burrell, and he clearly like he was out at first, but they gave Order the bag. It was a 1-0 lead for St. Louis at the time. Next thing you know, Kansas City rallies, gets the lead. Then the series goes to Game 7, and Kansas City wins the World Series. If he's called out, does that change the landscape? Does that mean that St. Louis wins that World Series? Does Whitey Herzog have multiple rings? Because he had multiple appearances. Whitey Herzog was one of the most important managers in baseball at the time. He might not have been as colorful as Tommy Lasorda or seen as a guy who could go wherever and do the thing like Sparky Anderson, but he was in that mix with them, you know. And it was Dick Howser was the manager of Kansas City, I believe, at the time. And Kansas City had a heartbreaking loss to the Phillies in 1980. So this was wild. Here they were, and for George Brett and everything. There was always like one play or one thing or something that turns an event. But it was the interstate Missouri World Series. It was one of those World Series that it was compelling. It went 7 games. There was no instant replay. So it's not like you can go back in time and say, 40 years ago, you don't have the technology. That doesn't really mean anything because I've seen instant replay where it didn't work too. So does it really mean anything? It's just that now you got more ways to highlight the faux pas. But baseball is just like any other major sport. It's always a game of inches, calls, what didn't go your way, what goes your way. They were two compelling franchises. They were both successful franchises in the 80s, and it was a very compelling interstate World Series. It was and that's back when the American League, National League played, and it was really differences in the league. Unlike what you've seen the last, 15, 20 years, where it's not like a lot of fundamental differences because styles are more apt, and it's kind of like been watered down. Back then, you could tell the difference. Well, for one thing, pitchers didn't bat. So in the American League, so the DH rule was in effect. And it felt like two different worlds. It really did. If you were a baseball fan back then, I dare you to come at me and tell me the 60s, 70s, 80s, and through the 90s that the American League, National League felt